A reading from the book of 2 Kings. Today is November 28th. Our reading from 2 Kings is chapter 23. At the king's summons, all the elders of Judah and Jerusalem assembled before him. The king went up to the house of the Lord together with all the men of Judah and all the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and the priests and prophets, all the people, young and old. And he read to them the entire text of the covenant scroll which had been found in the house of the Lord. The king stood by the pillar and solemnized the covenant before the Lord, that they would follow the Lord and observe his commandments, his injunctions, and his laws with all their heart and soul, that they would fulfill all the terms of this covenant as inscribed upon the scroll. And all the people entered into the covenant. Then the king ordered the high priest Hilkiah, the priest of the second rank, and the guards of the threshold, to bring out of the temple of the Lord all the objects he made for Baal and Asherah and all the hosts of heaven. He burned them outside Jerusalem in the fields of Kidron, and he removed the ashes to Bethel. He suppressed the idolatrous priests whom the kings of Judah had appointed to make offerings at the shrines in the town of Judah and in the environs of Jerusalem, and those who made offerings to Baal, to the sun and moon and constellations, all the hosts of heaven. He brought out the image of Asherah from the house of the Lord to the Kidron Valley outside Jerusalem and burned it in the Kidron Valley. He beat it to dust and scattered its dust over the burial ground of the common people. He tore down the cubicle of the male prostitutes in the house of the Lord at the palace where the women wove coverings for Asherah. He brought all the priests from the towns of Judah to Jerusalem and defiled the shrines where the priests had been making offerings, from Geba to Beersheba. He also demolished the shrines of the gates, which were at the entrance of the gate of Joshua, the city prefect, which were on a person's left upon entering the city gate. The priests of the shrines, however, did not ascend the altar of the Lord in Jerusalem, but they ate unleavened bread along with their kinsmen. He also defiled Topheth, which is in the valley of Ben Hinnom, so that no one might consign his son or daughter to the fire of Moloch. He did away with the horses that the kings of Judah had dedicated to the sun at the entrance of the house of the Lord, near the chamber of the eunuch Nathan-Melech, which was in the precincts. He burned the chariots of the sun, and the king tore down the altars made by the kings of Judah on the roof, by the upper chamber of Ahaz, and the altars made by Manasseh in the two courts of the house of the Lord. He removed them quickly from there and scattered their rubble in the Kidron Valley. The king also defiled the shrines facing Jerusalem to the south of the Mount of the Destroyer, which King Solomon of Israel had built for Ashtoreth, the abomination of the Sidonians, for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, and for Milcom, the detestable thing of the Ammonites. He shattered their pillars and cut down their sacred posts and covered their sites with human bones. As for the altar in Bethel and the shrine made by Jeroboam son of Nebat, who caused Israel to sin, that altar too, and the shrine as well, he tore down. He burned down the shrine and beat it to dust, and he burned the sacred post. Josiah turned and saw the graves that were there on the hill, and he had the bones taken out of the graves and burned on the altar. Thus he defiled it, in fulfillment of the word of the Lord foretold by the man of God who foretold these happenings. He asked, "What is the marker I see there?" And the men of the town replied, "That is the grave of the man of God who came from Judah and foretold these things that you have done to the altar at Bethel." "Let him be," he said. "Let no one disturb his bones." So they left his bones undisturbed together with the bones of the prophet who came from Samaria. Josiah also abolished all the cult places in the towns of Samaria, which the kings of Israel had built, vexing the Lord. He dealt with them just as he had done to Bethel. He slew on the altars all the priests of the shrines who were there, and he burned human bones on them. Then he returned to Jerusalem. The king commanded all the people, "Offer the Passover sacrifice to the Lord your God as prescribed in this scroll of the covenant." Now the Passover sacrifice had not been offered in that manner in the days of the chieftains who ruled Israel, or during the days of the kings of Israel and the kings of Judah. Only in the 18th year of King Josiah was such a Passover sacrifice offered in that manner to the Lord in Jerusalem. Josiah also did away with the necromancers and the mediums, the idols and the fetishes, all the detestable things that were to be seen in the land of Judah and Jerusalem. Thus he fulfilled the terms of the teaching recorded in the scrolls of the priest Hilkiah had found in the house of the Lord. There was no king like him before who turned back to the Lord with all his heart and soul and might, in full accord with the teaching of Moses, nor did any like him after arise. However, the Lord did not turn away from his awesome wrath which had blazed upon against Judah because of all the things Manasseh did to vex him. The Lord said, I will also banish Judah from my presence as I banished Israel, and I will reject the city of Jerusalem which I chose, and the house where I said my name would abide. The other events of Josiah's reign and all his actions are recorded in the annals of the kings of Judah. In his days, Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, marched against the king of Assyria to the river Euphrates. King Josiah marched toward him, but when he confronted him at Megiddo, Pharaoh Necho slew him. His servants conveyed his body in a chariot from Megiddo to Jerusalem, and they buried him in his tomb. Then the people of the land took Jehoahaz. They anointed him and made him king in place of his father. Jehoahaz was 23 years old when he became king, and he reigned 3 months in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Hamutal, daughter of Jeremiah of Libnah. He did what was displeasing to the Lord, just as his fathers had done. Pharaoh Necho imprisoned him in Riblah in the region of Hamath to keep from reigning in Jerusalem. And he imposed on the land an indemnity of 100 talents of silver and a talent of gold. Then Pharaoh Necho appointed Eliakim, son of Josiah, king in place of his father Josiah, changing his name to Jehoiakim. He took Jehoahaz and brought him to Egypt, where he died. Jehoiakim gave Pharaoh the silver and the gold, and he made an assessment of the land and paid the money demanded by Pharaoh. He exacted from the people the land of the silver and gold to be paid Pharaoh Necho according to each man's assessment. Jehoiakim was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 11 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zebedah, daughter of Pedaiah of Rumah. He did what was displeasing to the Lord, just as his ancestors had done.